Women Entrepreneurship Day was actually on Saturday, but we're celebrating it today. It was started by the UN headquarters in New York, but it's now globally celebrated across 144 countries. So I know that we today are representing quite a lot of different countries, which is awesome. The purpose is to highlight the challenges that women entrepreneurs uniquely face, as opposed to other groups that are also disadvantaged. And also, more importantly, to mobilize the ecosystem to build further women-led companies from founders, business leaders, investors, change makers, and supporters as well, to empower our community. So, Ipshita, do you want to explain GBF and GBX as well?
Sure, very quickly. I think we found women entrepreneurs often, having been one myself, we do have challenges towards accessing financial capital, but there's other aspects of building our social capital, the networks that don't come, the privileged positions of knowing the right people and the advisors and the investors and where to recruit from, that doesn't come easily. Also, the human capital is, Rosemary was mentioning in the beginning her work with coaching, but investing in ourselves to be the best version of ourselves is quite important. So the human capital development, and also just building our knowledge and technical skills and financial skills, so that growth of those multiple aspects of capital was why we kicked off this community, which over the last 18 months has organically grown to over 1,900 scientists and entrepreneurs and investors who just stay engaged with specific roundtables and workshops that we do around imposter syndrome, around International Women's Day, around speech coaching. So we try and organize these every 3 to 6 months, whenever we can manage to get ourselves organized to help our community and actually learn from them as well. So the only last thing I'll mention before handing back to Laura is the best thing about this is it's a closed community, and we love having your insights and comments and learn about your work and what you do. So please do introduce yourself on the chat box. I'll do the same as well. And please do keep asking questions. Let's keep this live.
Yep, we lost the end of that, but yes, please do keep asking questions and use the chat feature, introduce yourself. Later we'll have a more open Q&A, and then we can see everyone in the gallery view and ask lots of questions. I'll start with introductions, and so I'll introduce myself first because I wasn't supposed to be running this. I am the CEO of Co-Laboratories, which is an incubator for biotechnology companies. I have spent the last 6 or 7 years in the USA, where they have lots of incubator space, lots of fresh biotech startups, and I noticed a great lack of this in the UK. So my idea was to take this, bring it back to the UK, and help other people not face the frustrations I faced 8 years ago when my company had to go to the US. So I am very aware of California Life Sciences. I loved working with them in the few companies I was there with. So it'd be great to hear from Sibylle about her work with that. So I'll start with introducing Sibylle, as I've mentioned, California Life Sciences. I'm going off everyone's LinkedIn bios because I always find them very interesting what people say about themselves. So Sibylle's tagline is supporting early stage startups from academic spin-off to Series A, which is great. We really need that. So definitely part of the ecosystem. You have more than 15 years experience in startup, corporate, BD, equity fundraising, and all of that for therapeutics, diagnostics, and medtech startups. So that's really cool. Love to hear more about that later. And yeah, that sounds like a great ecosystem builder. So then we've got Tara, who I love your tagline because I was like, oh, I just thought of you as this amazing CEO, but you actually have put lots of other things as well. So you're a product innovation expert, you're proficient in leading diverse teams, all kinds of great things that bring products to life, which is great. You said you love to inspire and lead people to be their best, which is really important. I think supporting each other is so key in this environment. So I'm really keen to hear more about that as well. And then Ipshita, who I know quite well at this point. We've worked together for a number of years. and I'm now working as an ambassador for GBF as well. So I'm very excited to work with Ipshita on that. And Ipshita is, the CEO of GBF, an amazing group trying to get more funding and awareness to women-led companies, and also set up the GBX, which is great. That's why we're all here today. You're part of the Bio Innovation Impact Group. You are the founding partner and CEO of your fund. You're an investor, a strategist, and visiting lecturer, is what your tagline says, which is great. Does anyone have anything to add? Any other hidden groups that you're part of?
And leave the secret drinking society is not mentioned here. So,
well, then they wouldn't be secret. Great. I'm so excited to get talking to all of you ladies here today. And I'm just going to kick off the first talk with sharing a personal challenge you faced in your entrepreneurial journey. And actually, the reason I wanted to read out all your bios and all of the things you're into is because this morning I came upstairs after my chat with Ipshita dressed in my sports gear, and my partner said to me, "Oh, is this sports Laura today?" And I just had a thought, this sounds like I'm a Barbie doll. I'm wearing different outfits for different roles. And he said, "Oh, well, normally you're CEO Laura or badass Laura or whatever." So I just thought that was very telling. Almost all the women entrepreneurs I've worked with, we wear all these different hats or different outfits to fit into the different roles we're playing. So I just thought, maybe you could feed back on that, on your personal challenges in fitting into all these roles that you have to. So maybe we can start with Tara.
Sure. Thank you, Laura. And hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us from around the world. I'm looking forward to a good conversation. So I sort of want to be greedy and give multiple answers to this question. The first sort of challenge, and I think many entrepreneurs and leaders have it, is sort of, particularly when you're in an early stage business, managing that comes with growth of a business. And that might be cultural change. It might be you yourself having to come on a journey of, at one point you're everything. You're finance, your technology, your marketing, you wear literally all the hats, and over time you bring other people into the organization who sort of you need to hand over to, which is a really challenging thing to do, actually, but a very necessary one. And so I think sort of managing the change that comes with growth is a key one. More on the women's side of things, I think the female side of things, I think there's a couple of real pointed challenges that I've had. The first is it's quite obvious, I think, but the challenges of fundraising, where particularly for us, our business is both female founded and female led, but also we have a women's health product. And, it's pretty common in my experience that people understand and invest in problems that they have experienced or can really, wrap their head around. And when you're talking about pregnancy and labor, that's, a uniquely female experience. And so bringing investors on that journey and having them to really appreciate has been honestly very, very challenging. And particularly when you're pitching to an investment community that's broadly made up of men. And my third, so I'm being really greedy and giving three answers. The third challenge is actually around board diversity. So, and on a similar vein, so we have we've currently got three, they're absolutely wonderful directors who are men, and our founder, Sarah, who's obviously a female, and we have tried so hard to recruit more women onto our board. And, we're commonly met with, "Oh, that's so flattering. Thank you very much. I'm just not sure I'm really ready yet, but here's this great man who I know, you should talk to him." And I can't tell you how many times we've had that sort of a conversation. And then you criticised from the outside world for maybe not having enough diversity in your board or in leadership. And we try really hard to get that. And so, that's a challenge as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I wouldn't even consider that people might refuse. Yeah, because I've also heard the women who are often on boards get asked to do lots of boards, and then they have a reputation for that, but they can't do all of the companies that they'd like to. So
Yeah, that's true too. That's true too.
Yeah. Oh, well, if Ipshita, do you want to give your insight to a personal trial?
I felt one of the first things was financial challenge in becoming an entrepreneur. I do think if you are either on a full-time job or if you're a student stepping into the industry, the first risk of not getting a proper paycheck and the challenge of how do you support your rent or your mortgage or your expenses. It's really risky when at the very early pre-seed stage, it's not validated. So often we do find these amazing portfolio women who are doing multiple jobs because, you know, they are either consultants or they are working in a company and doing this part-time, but that financial challenge definitely, I found after finishing my PhD, I wanted to pay off my debt and I didn't have the luxury of jumping into full-time entrepreneurship. So I felt financial is one. Of course, the challenge sticks on, as Tara was saying, and Sibylle and I presented this in San Diego with a Women in Bio showcase about the funding gap that female founders face, which improves and gets worse. And during COVID, it has got worse. And so we all know the headline numbers, but that financial challenge, both that first step, but also fundraising is quite significant. The second point and my last point is the confidence gap that a lot of entrepreneurs face. So I had this wonderful retreat with my two partners, fund partners, Giorgio and Kate, and they often are probably the best cheerleaders I have with the fund, because they'd say, don't poke so many holes on yourself because everyone else is busy doing it anyway. And that's quite useful for us to understand that women are quite reflective often and are constantly looking at what can I do better, where have I gone wrong? And those are great sort of personal development things, but I do feel we focus on not being good enough too often. And you'll have plenty of other people in your team or your investors or in the market who will keep questioning you. So I think those two aspects of financial and confidence gaps are quite tricky in the early stages.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. And Sibylle, I guess you've met lots of startups and companies of all types in California. So I'd love to hear your insight on this as well, either from yourself or other people you've met.
Yeah. So I actually don't have a very successful story, because I got quite the full stop when I moved from Germany to here in the US, and there was something I didn't know about. And this is obviously a gender difference, and how females who might have international background, and I believe that there might be some immigrants in the audience. So I was not aware of this. This was my longest gap I had. Until somebody took me aside and said, why don't you focus a little bit more on female founders? So this relationship building and not having anybody who supports you, having a different education than it's used in the US, having a conception, I was sure that here in the US, it looks like in Europe, where females are really accepted as partners, or at least in Germany and Scandinavia and in not all countries. It's not like that here. And once I focused with Women in Bio as well on female entrepreneurs, the whole thing turned. And I couldn't believe it. And that's also where I met Ipshita, and we have a lot of people from Women in Bio here in the audience. And I point out a few. Kelly, she is on our Boardroom Ready, Women Boardroom Ready committee and chairs it, or is co-chair. And yes, these are boardroom ready women, but they are not for startups, actually, Kelly, but I still recommend it. So we have at Women in Bio, which is also something I did. I was actually entrepreneur together with a team, and we built the Women Entrepreneur Center within Women in Bio and started out in San Diego with 12 founders. And then we extended it to the US, and that's where I found out all the problems Tara mentioned, and of course Ipshita, because really the network is important, but it's also important that we reach out to each other. And once we got funding, so we have several founders in our ranks who really got great Series A funding, that we are open to introducing our other female founders, maybe to investors who fit. So I struggled. I'm not an entrepreneur, but I worked with entrepreneurs and specifically first-time founders. And I love female founders because they also have a higher performance. And Ipshita didn't mention that, even though the funding is not as well. But one of the data points was that they, for less money, they have a much higher value they are generating. This are some of the studies and data points we try to collect. Yeah, so I just wanted to say more power to women, immigrants, Black founders, and that's also where the connection and the value with California Life Sciences coincides. Even though, and we don't, at California Life Science, we don't only focus on US or California, we also have international programs. And can I plug one thing? We have currently a female founder application open, and I want the female founders in life sciences look at that application for the FAST accelerator or advisory program, usually a seed stage, earlier stage. Mm-hmm.
Laura,
I'd just like to echo that.
I'll intersect a bit because I noticed a good question from Jessie Xiong in the audience, and we want to encourage more the audience speaking up. Jessie was on a discussion with me and Carmen and a few of the audience members from Biotech New Zealand on Thursday. I think it was done in person. And we had a really rich discussion on board governance and board observer roles. Jessie, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question to Tara yourself?
Hi, sure. Hi. So I'm Jess with the background of more on science as well as in a startup working as an entrepreneur as well. My question, I think it was quite close to heart because I'm also on essentially a board observership at the moment as a 1-year program with On Board. So I was wondering that the people you were talking about, the women that refuses the board position, were there in any sort of form of training before, or were there a board director before placing them to be like, oh, I'm not good enough, and then just passing out the opportunity to someone else? Or is there any more reason that they think that they're not enough? Or yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a great question. We, at the time, and look, this is 18 months ago, at the time we must have approached sort of 3 or 4 women who said no. One did, as Sibylle, I think it was Sibylle, mentioned, no, it was Laura actually, that, just had a lot of board seats already and just didn't have the bandwidth. 2 came on recommendation to us from people in our network who sort of suggested that they had what it takes. And when we approached them, it was probably a cold call. So maybe, I don't know what sort of a headhunting success rate there is. But I think there's a real, the responses to me were telling. And I think your point around be they board observer roles or program, and thanks to everybody who's put some of those programs in the chat, I'll pick them up after this. you know, be they sort of programs, and I know there's a number of them, and perhaps those help, but I think there's this, and I don't know the right word, but sort of a confidence gap, right? And a very quick to defer to someone else before really exploring the ins and outs and what that might mean. And so, you know, it was striking. It was striking that, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, but 100% hit rate. And it wasn't for us at the time that, you know, people didn't believe in our cause, or it wasn't that sort of a mismatch. It really was, oh, I don't think that's for me. And so, but I think you bring a great point around training and support, observer roles and mentorship as well, because those things are important, right? Those things are important, and they do help bridge that confidence gap as well. If you've had a go or had a test run or had a safe space to practice and learn those skills, and I think there's a lot more opportunity for success, and to fill that funnel, essentially to fill the pipeline with more talented women. They're out there, right? There is a lot of wonderful, you know, women who have a lot to contribute. We've got to work out how to get them to the table.
Yeah, because I'm thinking another side of a story of people not feeling confident is that they have lots of experience, they get shoulder tap a lot, and then, like you said, they filled up their capacity of helping out as well. So yeah, understanding there's 2 ends of the table. We just need to get more people in between the gap, I suppose. Yeah, that's
right. I often think of it not dissimilar to, you know, the funding gap, or that, you know, the famous you know, big deep chasm. It's not dissimilar for women in leadership positions and board positions. There's a lot really keen to come in the early end, and we should support them as best we can. And there's a few at the other end who are really experienced and sort of full to their capacity, and there's this huge cavern in the middle that there's opportunity to fill, right? And so how do we bring women from sort of this end the whole way through and fill that gap?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jessie. That was a really great question. And I'd like to, round up that, because I was going to move on to the next question, but I think that is such a key thing, is this confidence gap. And I will completely echo what Sibylle said. Coming to the US was a culture shock for me. I didn't expect to not be taken seriously as much as I was in the UK. I feel like in the UK, maybe in academia, I was taken less seriously because I was very young, which was totally understandable. But then when I got to the US, I got a lot of people saying I was both young and, oh, what do you know? Which I realized later was, oh, well, do you have the experience? You're just a young girl. And so several startups later, I still get that in the US, but not in the UK, which I was very surprised by. So yeah, definitely echo that. Europe maybe is a little bit that, I don't know what New Zealand and Australia are like.
Has to do with World War II. In the US, the women had to go back home, and in Europe, they stayed at their jobs post World War II. And that's why we have probably a little bit more parity there.
Yeah, definitely taken more seriously. That makes a lot of sense. So going from the maybe slightly worse news, but let's go to what do you find exciting in the intersection between gender and health tech and all of those things? Let's find something to be really excited about. So let's start with Ipshita. You're seeing lots of exciting companies at the moment.
I am, and Heather, I did note your hand, so please don't give up. We'll come to you in a few minutes. On the intersection of gender and health, we talk a lot about women's health issues, and I think going all the way from menstruation to menopause, that's had a lot of focus. What I found interesting is how much broader healthcare, so broader biotech and diagnostics and medical devices and digital health doesn't include enough female data. That really concerns me. So when we look into developing pain management, or looking at therapies for Alzheimer's, or looking at even cardiovascular therapies, or designing of certain digital health technologies, I think there's no sort of regulation that's been put through on the diversity of data that's going through clinical studies. Of course, if you're doing one designed specifically for female patients, that's different. When McKinsey earlier this year in March 2022 did a review of only 1% of healthcare innovation has actually had inclusive data, female inclusive data, I was quite surprised by that. So what I find exciting is not the gap, but from even if I put a business or market point of view, you have half of the world's customers there who, if these therapies and devices and products and services work, they will buy it, and women love to buy. So why aren't we building accounting for that half customer base? So that's very much the thesis for our new fund, is basically focusing on healthcare innovation that is women-led, but not just in women's health. Our first investment is in Tara's company in Baymatob, which is very much in women's health, but we're looking broader towards inclusive healthcare. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts. I'm very excited. I just think there's so much of a difference health innovation can bring to patients if we get the right data included.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, if Heather, I just asked if your question was related to what was just said, or should it wait for the Q&A? So just let me know, but otherwise we'll go on to Sibylle quickly.
So it was more related to the board stuff. So just a quick plug, having been through a board ready boot camp and having paid for the privilege of doing that and being sort of dissatisfied with, still being very much of my own sort of board, seeking out board positions. I think it's just very funny. I don't know that you guys feel like going out there when I have been in rooms with people who paid thousands of dollars to participate, to be ready, who are very senior. And it seems like there's a big gap there just in terms of connecting those graduates to the right people, because I know just plenty of people who are ready to go, who've been trained, and I would dare say that maybe the guys haven't, even gone through the step of having to pay and trained, and then it's just discouraging to hear that there's still this. That's why I'm happy if anybody wants to reach out to me to connect with. I mean, I just know so many amazing people who are ready, trained, ready to go. We're happy to work with startups and do that role. So please follow up with me if you'd like. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to piggyback. Can I just piggyback onto that? I think it's a really important point, right? Because I can see in the chat all these resources that are coming, which is so great. So thank you. Please keep them coming. But I don't know if this is loading too much onto you, Ipshita, but if there were to be some sort of a forum that could connect, startups need very specific board capabilities and input and insights, and life sciences, healthcare and biotech also needs sort of really specific background and knowledge. And so sort of loading up these things, going to a generic sort of, I don't want to quote unquote board graduate program to try and find a female board representative isn't necessarily, when you've got these specific qualifications that you're looking for, may or may not be that. So if there were more industry specific or startup specific, and perhaps they're here, sorry, I haven't looked at the resources that are being shared, places to connect, early stage businesses and specific biotech and healthcare businesses, in my case, to that talent, that would be a really helpful forum and place to connect.
Can I add something to this boardroom discussion, because this is very, very important. So currently I'm helping one company to build their board, and it's very key that we start out with the right skills first, because we need people who know how to scale. And for right now, it could be either male or female. And in our case, we have more females we know who would help us than we have males. So I have the other way around to see that we stay in the diversity. And then for all those in the audience, and I know some of them, please connect with me, because I would also like to connect you with somebody who places, especially in Series A, because then you have to know the investor in order to be at all possible to get onto a board. And I don't have that connection either, or no, I'm right now maybe on my first board position, and I have no training, but I know how to fundraise, I know how to scale and all that. And governance is somewhat important, but not so important for a startup pre-Series A. That's my view. Somebody Kelly might have a different view out there, because she's running the Women in Bio Boardroom Ready program, which has an emphasis also on governance. And they might be very good candidates for Series A or Series B. So look in what stage you are. And in the beginning stage is really important. I learned also from another company to maybe have 5 board members, because in order, depending on who's your investor, because they got an imbalance by not adding an independent. And that's what I'm going for. I'm going for the independent position. So there are some strategies how to build a strong board, and maybe Ipshita could have another workshop or something in helping us to what really makes a strong board. I'm on a learning curve there too, but I'm picking by skills, and there's a lot of women who have these skills. And so I think Vandana is interested in the audience. Heather is interested. So we should pick, we should remember their names and help them maybe connect with other women founders.
Yeah, just a quick comment that, Tara, I love the idea. My board keeps me focused towards investing in the companies. They said, the best thing we can do is put the capital in the hands of these awesome entrepreneurs. So and as much as, trust me, Tara, I've got 5 or 10 things I want to do at the same time. And my board keeps going one thing at a time. Let's get this fund rolling, and let's get more investments done. And then we can expand the channels for the GBF organization. But I'd say between people like Sibylle, and I know Liz Boyce from Aus Biotech, we've been talking about women in boards in Australia a fair bit. Kelly's here from Women in Bio. And in fact, Biotech New Zealand, we were talking about what makes a good board. I think, Sibylle, your point of what stage of the company, but also it's not just a diversity number. It's not just getting 50-50, but it's also an inclusion question. That was a really good discussion we had in Auckland last Thursday. Was just having the female board members is not enough for token representation. Are we really imbibing or acting upon or some of the suggestions? How's the board dynamics and culture? So there's quite a few insights there. I'd say there is probably a room for individuals to step up and share what we do, but we probably could think of doing a specific discussion on this, and pooling, I think, a bunch of these resources together will help a lot of people, I feel. But Laura, I think we've completely got sidetracked from your question of gender and health tech. If you still wanted, I've done my bit. Did you want us to go back?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to highlight, yeah, we do need to find someone to do this service for us. It sounds like everyone needs it. So I've actually been talking to the CEO of B2B Match, and I think she's planning to do similar things to this. So I will catch up with her next week. She's called KC, and I spoke to her at Silicon Valley, comes to the UK. She's originally from Canada, and she's been trying to connect lots of businesses, and actually on their platform, they have a shortage of women. So all of the women go sign up to B2B Match. It's to match businesses offering different services or different helpful things. So it's spelled B2 and then B as in the buzzing bee, so that you can all find that. And she's adding extra capabilities to help women on the platform, because apparently the women's profiles are actually way more successful, get way more connections and matches, but are only 30% of the platform. So definitely go sign up to that. And maybe I can convince her to add this sort of capability. It sounds like the right sort of place. or if anyone else has suggestions in the chat as well. So yeah, then we can catch up. So Sibylle, if you want to give your insight onto cool gender health tech that you're.
So I'm currently with Women in Bio. I have to admit we didn't have too many femtech companies, but with the help of Ipshita, Golden Seeds, and so on, and also actually Dawn Bell from Novartis, we got really good diagnostics, and our criteria is also we want at least one C-level women executive, or ideally a co-founder. But lately, I reconnected with Portfolio. They only invest in femtech, and I think Ipshita, Portfolio in California, correct? Yeah. And there is also a Texas group. So I will focus a little bit more on this femtech side, but I have to admit, with the Women Entrepreneur Center and also with California Life Sciences, where we want to have really a lot of female founders and underrepresented founders, we did not specifically focus on health issues of the female, but we focus on diversity in clinical trials and research to already include different populations in research, because when you don't do it in research, it's too late to do it in clinical trials and open it up, because then you have a higher probability, at least in gene therapies, to fail if you did not focus on certain subpopulations. But that's a good point, Ipshita, you had there with diversity and focusing on that too.
And obviously the US market is very mature. Sibylle, I'm always surprised how specialized the funds are in US as well. And I think when we thought of health tech, I think in US it's very specific sometimes with these AI health, digital health applications. But for us, it was really the intersection of technology and healthcare, which is probably most of healthcare innovation. Which can be more inclusive. It's not just in the femtech or the, ovarian cancer or just female specific healthcare issues. It just feels that all of healthcare needs to be inclusive. I was seeing, Laura, there were some questions or discussions on soft skills as well, in case you wanted to pick it up, because I'm conscious of our time and our audience is awesome with their experience of programs they lead. So I'm trying to see if we engage more of their questions and thoughts as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've almost got to the end of what I wanted to kick off with anyway. So yeah, maybe we could just finish with Tara. Obviously, we're very excited about you, so we'll finish with you, and then we can get straight to the audience questions.
Yeah, thank you. Look, 2 comments. One's a follow-on from the themes we've already talked about, actually. So I actually a few weeks ago I was in Washington and I met with the Program for the Health of Women with CDRH, who are underneath FDA, obviously. It was a really interesting conversation. One of their key focus areas at the moment, and particularly it's in their future strategy that was released this year, is around appropriate representation of gender in clinical trials and in medical research. And I think there was a quote that the director of the program said to me when we were meeting, and it stuck with me. And she said, if the data doesn't include you, then the therapy's not necessarily going to be fit for you. And I think that's exactly true. I mean, that sums it up in one sentence. And so it's great that there are policymakers who have a focus on this. And I think hopefully that will start to pull through and change representation in data. But I just want to make that comment, because I think it is now starting to come from sort of the policymakers down, as well as just coming from the companies up. And I think that's important. In terms of the opportunity that I see in health and women's health and this intersection between technology and gender, it's actually a huge opportunity that comes from a terrible place, I think. So if I use our business as an example, we're trying to reinvent pregnancy and labour monitoring. So if you're a mum giving birth today, you are monitored with virtually the same technology that monitored your grandma when she gave birth in 1960. There has just been almost no innovation in the space in generations, and that's appalling, but it also presents incredible opportunity, particularly in a time where we have not enough yet, but more and more women coming through STEM and being interested and educated in technology and its application and in innovation, in entrepreneurship, which is absolutely wonderful. And there's these entire markets and entire segments of the markets that have been absolutely ignored and left behind, not just for 5 or 10 years. We haven't just missed the smartphone era. I mean, we've missed the whole sort of digital technology revolution, which means that if you think of an application in women's health, it's likely there's an opportunity there. And if you're someone who's technically or innovation minded or with some STEM skills, who's a creative thinker with an entrepreneurial mindset, there is opportunity to make a really significant difference to the lives of women, to the lives, and we all know the lives of women, just, I've been told too many times that it's a very small niche market. I'm not sure if there's really a market opportunity there, rubbish like that. But the lives and the health of women isn't just about women. It's about families, it's about society, it's about culture. The potential impact on quality of life and those sorts of things is incredible. The market opportunity and financial opportunity is also incredible. And so I think there is immense opportunity. I find it incredibly exciting. And whilst it's a terrible situation that we're in, I really look forward, truly, I look forward to the next 5 and 10 years in particular, because I think we're going to see some pretty exciting tech and some pretty exciting solutions coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was really inspired recently in a very similar vein by a woman called Katerina, who's running an Oxford health tech company that I spoke to. And she was an engineer by training, not anything to do with health tech at all, observed a surgery, couldn't believe the technology they were using, and then fought to get in front of clinicians to say, hey, I've got a much better technology, let's use this. But they just weren't that interested, because she was a woman not in medical, and so she eventually fought to get some people to fight for her. Yeah, so how many more innovators could we have with the more women at the table?
Absolutely. And that, that story is almost identical to our founder Sarah's story, who brought forward a technology, and investors and technicians said, well, if this was really a problem, the clinicians would have solved it. And she went to the doctors and said, well, this is a problem. They're like, well, you're not a doctor, so we won't talk to you. So she went and did a PhD in medicine so that she could put her technology in front of the world. I mean, if that's the barrier and if that is the bar, I mean, we're talking about the top 0.000 something percent, of the population who's really willing to jump over that bar. And I don't know exactly how we lower that bar to a reasonable level, but that story is unfortunately common.
Yeah, no, I mean, now you've said that, I'm reminded of, I spoke to a friend just yesterday who is working for a Cambridge company that collects data for gynecologists and others to prove to them when things change or work, and they're fighting with data to show that these things work. One of them was telling a woman before you do a procedure during critical birth moments. Does telling the woman lead to better outcomes? And to us, the answer is obvious. Of course, if you tell a woman, I'm going to do this procedure, she'll be less stressed about it. But they needed the data to back that up, which was quite sad. So, yeah, that's also quite a sad state of affairs, but we're also changing it. So it's good to hear. Going back to,
I just wanted to add two positive points on that. So we had a nurse in one of our fast companies who invented something, and I don't remember what the project was, but she's very successful. And then right now I have one Stanford spin-off, Scopy Medical, and we will probably also feature them at JPM as a female founder with a nasal micro endoscope, portable endoscope. And so it's there's a lot of, in Colorado, a lot of women who are in that health tech, med tech space. And I love it, and engineers.
That's great. How did they find your program? Do you know how they found the FAST program?
So we reach out to universities, and our advisors also recommend it to us. But we want to really promote it also more with female founders all across US. And we're currently thinking to even open it up to one female founder internationally. So we're talking about this.
It's brilliant. And there's a few accelerators and programs that people have talked about, and I've been a part of them, and we found these initiatives super useful actually. But I also wanted to highlight perhaps what the support programs, because people were talking about soft skills and mentoring and about accelerators. I think they're useful for sure. They definitely help bring the confidence and the technical gap and showcase the companies to multiple investors. I'd still like to highlight that there was a World Bank report on the top, I don't know what, 50 or 100 accelerators, including Y Combinator and Techstars. I can draw it out because it's some thinking strategy that Giorgio and I and the team were looking at in building a female accelerator or not. We found that people going through these top programs, female founded companies, were still raising 30% less capital than male-led businesses. And I think that's where I feel so much of this conversation. And I think because women love to invest and work on themselves and improve themselves, that's brilliant. But I do think it's not just, the problem's not just with women-led companies. The problem is at a broader market level. I was highlighting in the last panel of how do we get investors to change their unconscious bias. Shouldn't investors be having training programs on how they should be doing due diligence and what sort of questions? But I did want to shift that kind of conversation to how can we improve fundraising as well? Because programs and support systems are really useful, but at the end of the day, we do need to get the capital to talk. So I thought that might be a good one to perhaps think about in the next few minutes too as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. Who wants to take that?
So one thing I jump in, because that was the main reason why we wanted this Web Entrepreneur Center, Women in Bio, to really move the needle for female founders, and Ginger took over, and we have some of the female founders in the audience. It is not so easy. It's not overnight. So we have to work. But the most important thing is sometimes, and Ipshita and I, we talked about this, actually male investors are our best ambassadors. So that's what I realized. And secondly, we need to build our own community. And once we have now several female founders who have raised really great rounds, and we need to approach them, and we need to ask them to introduce us to their investors, because the best introduction is really from a founder to the investor, where the investor had experience working with that female founder. And one of the things is I'm not an asker. So this is one of my weaknesses. And maybe some females also don't do that. I don't want to generalize, but I never ask enough. That is my big mistake also, and so I was generating my own failure basically by not being asking.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I was actually going to finish up the questions that I have with just saying, do you have some advice to give to others? So ask more is absolutely a great one. And if Tara and Ipshita, you have also something that would help solve some of these issues, maybe some advice.
I don't know if I have any great advice. I'm in the thick of another fundraiser at the moment, actually. And I mean, look, I don't know if I've got the answers. It's definitely not easy. You learn pretty quickly who the friendly or interested investors are and the supportive investors and who are not. Some are honestly just not nice people, and they're there to show off their ego and their power and these sorts of things. And I've had some incredibly unpleasant conversations. I've been dismissed rapidly, I think maybe because I look young and also because I'm a female, and sometimes just because, you know what, the person on the other side of the table isn't going to be nice to you anyway. I think there's, for us, finding a point that resonates with the person on the other side of the table has been really important. Some of our most supportive investors, regardless of gender, have some level of personal understanding or connection to the problems that we're trying to solve. And I think that's probably true for any investment. And unfortunately, finding that when you're sort of reaching out to a whole group of strangers is that you sort of, it's a numbers game. And so you're looking for a needle in a haystack sometimes. And so, you know, persistence and resilience and all those sorts of things are very important. Warm introductions, as Sibylle said, you can't go past them. I mean, reaching out cold to investors has by and large not been successful to us. And we've had hundreds of pitches, and the cold calls or the cold introductions are by far less successful than the warm ones. So I think that's important. And particularly, Sibylle, you mentioned getting a warm introduction from a founder. I actually find getting a warm introduction from another investor even more powerful. So that's been particularly helpful if you can leverage your network with other investors. Sadly, we're really struggling for some time with pitching, female-founded, female-led women's health business to a predominantly male audience who didn't understand or didn't have first-hand experience in what we're solving. So we started bringing a male board member along to our pitches, and my very patient board have sat beside me silently through many pitches just to have a male face. They say hello, they say goodbye, and they're pretty much silent through the rest. And sadly, our hit rate did go up substantially, bringing them along to the meeting. So, when you're raising capital, you do what you need to do to get through. But we've used tactics like that, and the warm introductions in particular have been helpful too.
Yeah, I think that's so important to recognize, actually, that sometimes the biggest help is strong male allies that can help us get in with a warm introduction, or as you say, just a face. So
I have to say one thing, so investing introductions to other investors, if the investor has not invested in you, the other investors don't consider that a good introduction. So this is kind of underneath, they never tell you that. Whereas if I get an introduction from another investor to an investor because I'm neutral, then I can introduce founders. But as a founder, unfortunately, it doesn't help you if that investor, or at least I was told, it doesn't help you. Ipshita, you might have a different point of view, but this is maybe a male investor point of view I received. They will not usually think that's a good introduction if the investor is not investing in you.
I wouldn't repeat what Sibylle and Tara said because they're spot on between warm intros and getting being persistent. Only two quick things I'd add is it's really overwhelming for investors. We do get so many pitch decks, like it's every day on LinkedIn or emails or cold emails. And often you're looking for a pattern. You're looking for some trust base of, this is a person I've worked with before and has high credibility. And they've actually written out why they think we should look into this. So they've put a personal note. They've just not copy pasted a paragraph, but they've almost said, hey, I've worked with, I know Tara from a previous startup company, and she's just a stellar entrepreneur, and they've got strong experience in clinical development. I think that helps. Sibylle, I'd say with investors that pass on, often if something doesn't sit in your mandate, then that's fine. So if it's something for us, for example, in Series B or C, or if it's an ag tech or clean technologies, we'd just be like, look, we don't invest in this space. I know this entrepreneur this way. That's still fine. But yes, it does help when you have been involved with the company. I'd say persistence. I think don't be shy to keep replying. Don't do it 10 times, but if there's like some updates about your fundraising or some milestone that you've reached, feel free to update. And it doesn't have to be formal as well. If you see them in a networking conference, if you see or post some interesting link on LinkedIn, there's a way of following up. So I just say, yeah, it is quite overwhelming from an investor side. It takes me a week to kind of go through all the pitch decks and then put them on our data Excel and kind of map and prioritize which ones to go deeper on. It's quite a bit of work.